Today we're going deep, really deep into the idea of sacred space, how it shapes the way we experience the world.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
We're diving into Mircea Eliade's The Sacred and the Profane. And don't worry if you haven't read it, we're going to guide you through all the key ideas. Get ready to discover how people across history have found meaning and even a sense of the divine, in the world around them.
It's incredible how Eliade's work can just open up your thinking. He talks about how humans, how we experience the world in two really fundamental ways. The sacred and the profane.
Okay.
So the profane is our everyday world.
Right, the ordinary stuff.
The mundane, exactly. But the sacred, well, that's a whole other ballgame. It's the realm of the extraordinary, the supernatural.
Where we connect with something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly.
So it's almost like there's this invisible layer of meaning, right? Woven into the fabric of reality. And some people can see it, feel it, experience it, while others, maybe not so much.
You're exactly right. Eliade actually says that for many people in the modern world, the world just feels desacralized, like it's lacking that deeper meaning. We're so focused on, well, practical scientific explanations for things, But Eliade says, even if we don't really admit it to ourselves, even if we don't consciously acknowledge it, we all still have these traces of what he calls religious behavior. It's like this primal yearning for something more, something beyond just the everyday,
Right, so even if you think you're totally secular, completely rational, there's still this part of you that's seeking out the extraordinary.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
That's where the whole idea of, it's a big word, but hierophany comes in.
Okay, break that down for us.
So hierophany, it's how Eliade describes those moments when the sacred, it breaks through into our ordinary experience. Imagine you're walking through a forest, right? And you come across this majestic, ancient tree. Suddenly, you're just filled with this sense of awe, this deep reverence.
I've totally felt that before.
It goes beyond just appreciating the tree's physical beauty,
Yes, totally. It's like the tree becomes more than just a tree, It becomes a symbol of something much greater, something timeless.
Precisely. It could be a tree, a sacred stone, even something like a breathtaking sunset, right? For the person experiencing that hierophany, an ordinary object, it becomes something other.
Okay.
It becomes, like a vessel of the sacred. It's still itself, but it also points to something beyond itself.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this connects to the whole idea of sacred space. But, it's more than just places that have been, officially designated as holy, right? Like churches or temples.
You're right. It's bigger than that. For those who experience it, sacred space is like a rupture in the homogeneity of space,
A rupture.
It feels different, fundamentally different. It's set apart from just, the everyday. Imagine stepping into a grand cathedral, the soaring arches, the stained glass windows, that hushed atmosphere, right?
It's powerful.
All of it. It contributes to that sense of transcendence.
Like you've entered a completely different realm. What about cultures that don't have these grand cathedrals, right? Does Eliade talk about how other cultures experience sacred space?
Oh, absolutely, he does.
Okay.
He gives this example of the Australian Aborigines.
Okay.
They would carry a sacred pole with them as they traveled through their territory. By carrying this pole, they weren't just walking through a landscape. They were cosmicizing it.
Cosmicizing.
They were transforming it into a sacred realm.
It's like projecting meaning onto the physical world.
Exactly.
So it's not like sacred spaces are just randomly scattered around. There's intentionality behind them.
There is. Eliade argues that people across cultures, they haven't just stumbled upon these sacred spaces by chance. They've discovered them through signs, through rituals. Take the Akilpa tribe, for example. They had this sacred pole made from a gum tree trunk.
Okay.
And this pole, it was believed to be their connection to the divine. And they believed that if this pole ever broke, it would signify the end of the world, terrifying return to chaos.
So the pole wasn't just a random object. It represented order, stability, a connection to the sacred. This is fascinating. We often talk about our homes as sanctuaries, places of peace and comfort. Does Eliade say anything about the home as a sacred space?
He does, actually. He points out that in many traditional societies, houses were built, they were built as, he calls it, imago mundi.
Imago Mundi.
It means images of the world. They were intentionally mirroring the cosmos.
So like a microcosm.
Yeah, exactly. And there were specific rituals and symbols embedded in their construction. They reflected the creation of the world. Some cultures, they even believed that building a house, it was like enacting a mini creation myth, even involving symbolic sacrifice to ensure that connection to the divine.
That's incredible. So even the act of building a house could be imbued with spiritual significance.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if I've lost something in our modern approach to, architecture and home building.
It does raise some interesting questions about how we relate to our living spaces today, that's for sure. And it leads us to another fascinating part of Eliade's work, the concept of sacred time.
How is sacred time different from our everyday linear understanding of time, like how we see time?
Right, well imagine this. The North American tribes that Eliade studied, they use the same word for world and for year. It really highlights the cyclical nature of their existence, right? The idea that the cosmos was this living entity constantly being reborn.
Okay.
For them, time wasn't a straight line.
It was a circle.
A circle connected to the rhythms of nature and the cosmos.
Okay, so it's not about just, marking off days on a calendar.
Right.
Sacred time is about connecting to those eternal cycles of creation, destruction, and renewal.
You got it. And a big part of that connection is myth. He points out that myths, they're not just stories.
Right.
They're narratives that tell us about how the sacred broke into the world.
Okay.
And they actually offer models for human behavior.
I like that.
They help us understand our place in the grand scheme of things and how to live in harmony with the sacred.
Now that you mention it, I'm thinking about, how many cultures have festivals and celebrations that seem to, temporarily break us out of ordinary time. Is that kind of what Eliade's getting at with this sacred time idea?
You're right on track. He argues that festivals, they aren't just about having fun.
Right, they're usually tied to something deeper.
They're about stepping outside of linear time and reconnecting with that sacred, cyclical time. Think about how holidays like, Christmas or New Year's, how they feel different from everyday life.
They definitely have a different vibe. There's a sense of ritual and tradition that connects us to something, ancient.
Timeless.
It's like hitting that reset button, wiping the slate clean, starting fresh.
Exactly.
It's about reconnecting with that time of creation, tapping into that primal energy. Eliade even mentions how the Polynesians, they used cosmogonic myths, stories about the creation of the world for healing. They believed that by reconnecting with that time of creation, they could revitalize and renew life itself.
It's like they were tapping into the source code of existence. I'm starting to see the world in a whole new light.
It really is a different way of seeing things. It brings us to another really interesting part of Eliade's work.
Yeah.
The idea that religious man, he strives to imitate the gods.
He sees their actions as the blueprint for human behavior.
So it's not just about worshiping the gods from afar.
No.
It's about embodying their actions in our own lives. How do we even begin to understand what that looks like?
Well, it can be as simple as the act of eating, or as complex as rituals of sacrifice.
Okay.
Eliade gives some really thought-provoking examples. He talks about how in some cultures, cannibalism wasn't seen as this barbaric act, but rather as a ritual act that had divine precedent, a way to connect with and even absorb the power of the gods.
It really underscores how differently cultures have interpreted this idea of imitating the gods.
It does. And what's even more fascinating is Eliade's suggestion that the real sin isn't disobeying a moral code, but forgetting the mythical model, that blueprint for human action that connects us to the sacred.
So it's about staying connected to those stories, to those myths, those rituals that keep us aligned with the sacred.
Yeah, I think so.
But what about modern man, right? Person who maybe doesn't believe in gods or engage in traditional rituals. Does Eliade think there's any hope for us?
Well, that's where Eliade's observations become incredibly relevant to our lives today.
Okay.
He argues that even the most secularized person can't completely escape religious behavior.
Even if we don't believe in the same gods or follow the same rituals as our ancestors, we still have those impulses, those longings for connection and meaning.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
One example he gives is the idea of private mythology.
Private mythology.
Those narratives that we create in our dreams and fantasies. These personal stories, they often reflect our subconscious desires, our fears, our aspirations. They're like our own personal myths in a way.
Right, our own internal narrative.
Helping us make sense of our lives.
It's like we're all storytellers at heart,
Yeah.
right? Constantly trying to find meaning and purpose in our experiences.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Me too.
And it's not just in our inner worlds. He observed that patterns resembling initiations, they persist in modern life.
Interesting.
He points to experiences like psychoanalysis,
Okay.
military training, even intense personal challenges as echoes of those ancient rites of passage. They might not have the same, outward form,
Right.
but they serve a similar function, right? They
Right.
push us to confront our limits and emerge transformed.
So it's almost like even without those formal rituals, life itself becomes a kind of initiation, pushing us to grow, to become more fully ourselves.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And while we might not interpret those experiences through the same religious lens as our ancestors, Eliade's work, it invites us to consider the deeper, perhaps even sacred dimensions of these transformative journeys.
It's all starting to come together now. Eliade's work isn't just about, ancient rituals or distant cultures. It's about understanding this enduring human quest, right, for meaning, for connection to something larger than ourselves.
Yeah.
A quest that continues to shape our lives, even in our modern secular world.
It does.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the sacred and the profane such a powerful and enduring text. It challenges us to look beyond the surface of our lives and rediscover that sacred dimension that's been present all along.
It feels like giving us a new set of lenses, right?
Yeah.
Through which to view the world, a way to find the extraordinary within the ordinary. It's inspiring.
It is inspiring. Eliade, he encourages us to look at our lives and the world around us with this renewed sense of wonder. It's a really powerful invitation to reconsider how we experience the world, to slow down, to pay attention.
It's about recognizing that this longing for meaning, for connection to something beyond ourselves. It's not just some outdated relic of the past.
It's an essential part of what makes us human, even in our modern, often secular world.
So much of what we've talked about today, it's really challenged me to think differently about things that I usually take for granted.
Yeah, that's the beauty of Eliade's work. It invites us to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. See the sacred not as something separate from us, but as something that's interwoven with every aspect of our existence.
The way he connects the human body to the cosmos, the act of eating to a sacred ritual, even those challenging moments of transformation to ancient rites of passage.
Yeah.
It's also thought-provoking.
He encourages us to find those traces of religious behavior within ourselves, even if we don't subscribe to traditional religious beliefs.
And to remember that the sacred isn't something that we need to search for in far-off lands or ancient texts, right? It's right here, right now, present in the very fabric of our lives.
I think perhaps the most powerful takeaway from Eliade is this reminder that we have the power to create our own personal mythology, to find our own ways to connect with the sacred and to live lives that are just infused with meaning and purpose.
So even though we might not live in a world that explicitly acknowledges the sacred in the same way as our ancestors, we could still cultivate that sense of wonder, of reverence, of connection to something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. Eliade's work, it empowers us to find the sacred in our own unique ways and to create lives that resonate with meaning and purpose.
This has been such a fascinating and enriching deep dive.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on the world and my place in it.
I'm glad to hear that.